Hi guys, welcome to lesson 15, which is mostly a compilation of Regents questions regarding quadratic equation solving. So some of these might be tough, and this is supposed to be a tough lesson because we've learned a lot of stuff and we're going to practice it. So follow along, but the big idea that I want you guys to get during this lesson is, can you complete the square and can you use the quadratic formula? Those are the two big ideas I want you guys to focus on, or can you do those two procedures? So number one here, we're going to skip the opening exercise and jump right to number one here. Given g of x equals this trinomial and k of x equals 2x plus 16, solve the equation g of x equals 2k of x's. Algebraically, so I need to do it algebraically, so I have three choices here. ZPP, complete the square, or our favorite, our quad form, which hopefully you've been singing all week. Solve it to the nearest tenth. So this tells me I'm going to be rounding my answer. Rounding, which means I have irrational answers. So guess which choice is gone? I'm not even going to try to factor. Factoring is out the window because it tells me this is the giveaway that I have irrational answers. So let's clean this up, and then we'll pick a method to solve it. When we solve quadratics, we set them equal to 0. So hopefully you followed along with me there as I set this equation equal to 0. Goodbye. You guys miss that, don't you? So I set the equation equal to 0. And now I've got to pick factoring, complete the square, or quadratic formula. Those are my three tools that I have in my toolbox to solve this quadratic equation. And we already said factoring and the ZPP is out. We're not going to use that technique because I know I'm going to round my answers. Completing the square is also out. I could do it. In theory, I could do it, but I have to deal with the leading coefficient, which just makes it hard. This is not even, so that means I'm going to have to deal with fractions and more decimals. So let's just use the quad formula. Give me an A, 2. Give me a B, -1. Give me a C, -22. So now that I picked off those three coefficients, all we have to do now is substitute it into the quadratic formula. X equals the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2 times A, which is 2. You're all smart and know 2 times 2 is 4. So I substituted into the quadratic formula. And now I need to type that under the radical piece. Don't type in the square root, just under the radical. What's under the radical into my calculator? 1 plus or minus the square root of, let's see, -1 squared minus 4 times 2 times -22 is 177 is what I got. And here's the beautiful thing. It says give me a decimal. So at this point, I'm going to type into my calculator 1 plus alpha y equals enter, make a fraction, 1 plus the square root of 177 divided by 4. And I get 3 point nearest tenth, one place. I got 3.576. So tenth is here. Do I chop or round up? I round up, 3.6. Or 1 minus the square root of 177 over 4 is the other solution. The quadratic formula is beautiful because it just spits out the answers, -3.076. So do I chop or round up? I round up to -3.1. So those are my two answers. Rounded to the nearest tenth, that's when g of x equals 2k of x. So know that you have all these techniques. We now have to focus in on which technique works. So hopefully you're good at plugging into the quadratic formula, and when you see tenth, use your calculator. Type the crazy number into your calculator. Explain why you chose this method. Why did you choose this method? Well, factoring didn't work. Factoring wasn't going to work. And completing the square was going to be a disaster. It's going to be a mess. So we use the quad formula. I don't know. I found this to be an easy point. Why'd you use this method? I like using the quadratic formula, so that's the method I used. So hopefully you feel good with that one. Hopefully you feel good using the quadratic formula. Let's jump to 3. Which method of I'm going to start again. I can speak. The method of completing the square was used to solve this equation. So they used completing the square here. Which equation is a correct step when using this method? So it looks like I have to complete the square here. Because remember, how do I turn a trinomial into something squared? Well, we can look at these choices. I got it into something squared. We complete the square. But look what we can do here to make our lives easier. Right now it's a hard complete the square question, but I just made it into an easy one. I divided everybody by 2. So remember, when we complete the square, we ignore the constant term and look at these two guys, and we make a square. We actually make a square. X and X. And I take that middleman, I take my middleman and I cut him in half. -3 and -3, which leaves me with a box of 9, which leaves me with that term there is 9. That's the magic number I need to add. I need to add that in as well as subtract it to counteract that. I stuck in a 9, but I can't just add 9 wherever I want. I have to counteract it. So you factored and combine those guys together. So you factor the inside, x minus 3 and x minus 3, and you leave the outside guys alone. And one more step, and I think we're at the answer. X minus 3 squared equals 6. X minus 3 squared equals 6. We could keep solving this. How do I keep solving this just for fun? You take the square root, but when you take the square root, you've got to think of the quad formula. What's in front of the square root? X equals -b plus or minus. There, you got to have that plus or minus there. Then we'll add the 3 over. X equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 6. Those are my solutions to this quadratic equation. And remember, this is an irrational number because I have a rational plus an irrational. The sum of a rational and an irrational is always irrational. One more problem, and we'll call it lesson 15. This one's going to take us some time, but we're going to be good. This was a Regents question, so it's a tough one, but we're going to be able to do it. We're going to get there. We're going to be able to do it. So a rectangular picture frame measures 6 by 8. So I got a little rectangular picture. Maybe it's me. Oh, and then there's Miss Brusler hanging out with me. You can say hi to Miss Brusler. I guess she has purple hair. I guess I also have purple hair too. I want red hair. So there I am. There's Miss Brusler. Let's give her a hand. There we are. We're hanging out in E16 in class. This is our little picture frame. We'll say hi, everybody. So there's our picture. And Simone wants to build a frame around this picture so that it takes up an area of 100 square feet on the wall, square inches on the wall. So that'd be a huge picture, 100 square inches. So he's building a frame around me and Miss Brusler's 6 by 8 picture. So I'm adding X in each direction. So I need to know about my new rectangle. I need to know about this new rectangle. So this horizontal side, it was 8, but look what happened. I stuck on an X on each side. So that new side becomes 8 plus 2X. It was 8 across, but I stuck on 2 X's. Vertically, it was 6, but I stuck on 2 X's. So now I can write an equation. Area equals the product of the length and width. So 2x plus 8 plus 2x times 6 plus 2x is 100. I want to have the area equal 100. Well, that's not bad. That wasn't bad. Explain how your equation models the situation. Area is the product of length and width. Is the product of the two sides. I found expressions for the new bigger rectangle and set their product equal to 100. So area is the product of the two sides of a rectangle. So I found expressions for the new length and width, right? That's the new length. It's not the 6 by 8. 6 by 8, but I stuck on that frame around it, so I got a little bit more work to do. So I found the bigger rectangle and set the product equal to 100. Solve the equation here. So we've got to solve this equation, 8 plus 2x times 6 plus 2x equals 100. So I don't have a 100 product property, so let's make a box for these guys to make it a trinomial. Let's make a trinomial to make our lives a little bit easier. So 48, 12x. It's been a while since we've multiplied. We've been too busy factoring and completing the squaring. So 4x squared plus 28x plus 48 equals 100. And it's a quadratic equation. Hopefully you realize this entire unit has been about x squared equations. How do we solve equations that deal with x squareds? So it's a quadratic equation set equal to 100. So I'm going to subtract away 100. I have 4x squared plus 28x minus 52 is 0. So think of your options. Oh, wait a minute. Let's take out a GCF regardless. Let's divide everybody here by 4 because I think that's a GCF that works for everybody. Absolutely it does. So that's much nicer. So here's my equation I need to solve. I have to solve that guy. I've got 3 choices. I've got 0 product property, complete the square, or quad form. Those are my 3 choices. And it says nearest tenth again. That's a hint. That's a hint that I can't factor. Since it says round it to the nearest tenth, or it said simplest radical form, we don't get radicals or decimals when we factor. So that means I'm down to complete the square or quad form. I'm down to one of those 2. And since this is a 7, I can cut 7 in half. It becomes 3.5. I don't want to deal with that though. So let's use the quadratic formula. So a equals 1, b equals 7, and c equals negative 13. And we plug it in. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And here's the awesome part. Round it to the nearest tenth. I am literally going to type this entire thing into my calculator because it wants me to have a rounded answer. So here we go. Alpha y equals enter. Negative 7 plus, I'll hold the calculator close so you can hear me pressing the buttons. 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 13 over 2 is, tenth is one place, 1.5. Or I've got to do it again, but with a negative. I got 1.5249378. It was some crazy irrational number, so I rounded it. Or negative 8.5 is my other choice. Well, I'm going to get rid of the negative one because I'm talking about the picture frame. I'm talking about the width of that picture frame that I'm adding around my lovely picture of me and Mrs. Gusto here in E16, missing all of you. So we got x equals 1.5 is, give it a second to load, is the size of the piece of the wood we need to use. We need to put a 1.5 inch piece of wood around this to make it have an area of 100. So hopefully at this point you feel good with completing the square in the quadratic formula. On the homework, I got 4 little quick practice problems for you to do. The first 2 are pretty straightforward. On these 2, I want to give you a heads up. You got to do a little bit of work first. You got to make a box for x minus 3 and x minus 3. You've got to make a box for 7 minus x and 7 minus x. Then combine like terms. So that's kind of step 1 is make your boxes. Step 2 is combine like terms. Combine like terms and then set it equal to 0. So this is a tough one. This is a real challenge question here. If you can get the first 2 are important. So is this last one over here. This one's not bad. You just have to distribute first for this homework problem, which I already got started there for you. And then add 34 to get it equal to 0. So really I've got 3 homework problems for you, and then I got that tough problem that I got you set up with there. So try this homework, and that's it for the week, guys. Just one lesson this week. Take the week off. If you're behind, now's the time to catch up. But if you're behind, you probably shouldn't be watching lesson 15. You should be watching the earlier lessons. So enjoy the week, guys, and I'll make a video explaining what I expect from you else this week. See you guys soon.